Greetings, my excellent friend. Welcome to the Heavy Metal History Report.
All right, well, I am sitting here about to talk with Kyle from the band Vitriol. Kyle, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So I guess just let everybody know that listens real quick what you do in the band, how long the band's been around, and yeah.
The band has been around for, say, roughly about 7 years. I perform vocals, guitars, I compose the music, write the music, whatever. It's a 3-piece, so Adam performs bass and some vocals, and then Scott Walker, our drummer. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you guys get a pretty intense sound for just a 3-piece. You make a lot of those like 5- and 6-piece bands look pretty sad.
Well, it's kind of, I think it's like the 3-piece Napoleon complex, of like, I play, when we play live, I'll play 2 full stacks,
Mm-hmm.
And it's just because that you're already under predisposed scrutiny, being a 3-piece, that it's going to be thin, that, you can't risk anyone thinking that it is thin, so
Yeah, that's a good point.
We really try to keep it full.
I mean, I guess there's like limitations to like having a 3-piece, but at the same time, if you know how to utilize your own sound there, I think it always plays to your strengths to do so.
What do you? Yeah, I agree. It's tough, man. I mean, we've wrestled with it before. I mean, it's not like we started out committed to the 3-piece thing. I mean, I worked with about 4 different guitar players until I went into the studio and, into the music video and, whatever the initial just kind of exposure, the launch of the band as a 3-piece. I just gave up on it. It was just hard, man. I mean, especially as you're getting older, it's like, it's hard enough to find 2 other grown fucking men that can and want to play this music, let alone another one that I hold the creative reins of the band pretty tight, and finding another guitar player that can play the parts and feel comfortable taking that creative back seat is pretty anomalous. That's difficult to find. It's not. I don't think Vitriol will be a 3-piece forever. That's not my vision. There are some serious compromises live. Even, I have invested a lot of time and money into trying to make up for whatever I can. I run a stereo unit live, a doubler, pedal, the whole 9. But at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do. You can't emulate the thickness of 2 live guitar players.
I think that's one of those things too, where like, the sound that you have for like your recording should be one thing, and then the live sound should be a completely different thing, and people shouldn't always be expecting like you to sound exactly like you do on a record, because it takes away from the enjoyment of the live show.
Yeah, I think that's true in the sense that they should be appreciated in a vacuum from one another. Like, I don't think that one is indicative of the other. Like, you can let them be their own thing, but I think that if the style of your recording, like specifically in the case of Vitriol, right, the style of the recording is so necessary for the overall effect of Vitriol, because it's so pushed, it's so thick, it's so dense, it's so claustrophobic, it's kind of like almost peaking, and so if that's part of just that kind of that kick to the chest, that just kind of violence of the band, and you can't bring that level of intensity, it doesn't necessarily have to be this right guitar tone or what the fuck ever, it's like, But it has to be, if you're a band that the effect of your band is contingent upon your ability to physically affect the listener with how crushing one of the most abused descriptors in metal, but if that's your deal, really riffs, muscular riffs, and you come out live and you're a 3-piece and you have a fucking 212 and a whatever, and the sound guy's not killing it, and on the other side of the stage all you hear is bass and triggers, and it's like it's just you're done, you're just like, you're falling flat, you're over before you started. So that was my biggest fear. And even bands that have done it really well, like big heroes of mine, which is no surprise to anyone, is Hate Eternal. And that's a band that has done the 3-piece thing well. I don't think they've done it perfectly, and I think that the solo sections really suffer for it. And I've been fortunate enough to see Hate Eternal in the past as a 4-piece. And it's just simply better, I think it's more of like a practical decision for them to be a 3-piece rather than more of like a stylistic choice.
Yeah, I guess you do share a lot in common, because even then, like, everybody knows Rattan is like the mastermind behind most of everything that comes out of the whole band. So I can see the parallels.
I grew up making music with older dudes that were more sort of out of the hardcore scene. Mm-hmm. And I never too much into hardcore myself. No, like, feelings one way or the other, pretty ambivalent about it. But there was just, there was this impetus there that's just like to be very democratic, no theatrics, stripped. I remember, when I went to audition for my first, I was 16, I went to audition for this band. And I showed up with my BC Rich Warlock guitar. Mm-hmm. And I got kind of laughed out of the fucking room, because it was like more of a, I don't know how to describe, almost like a Dillinger style band. I don't remember what it was like, but they wanted nothing to do with that shit. It was like ESPs on their chest and the whole thing. I ended up playing in that band. You're gonna have to help me. I lose my train of thought. I have bad short-term memory.
It's all good. You were talking about like kind of like your early days there.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, yeah, democratic. That's right. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to do that a lot this conversation. So forewarning.
Don't worry about it.
So there was this. There were certain things that resonated with me with metal, particularly heavy metal. That was like, obviously the full scope of it as a subgenre, being that it wasn't, well, some people would scoff at the theatrics or the aesthetics, the emphasis of aesthetics in heavy music or metal. To me, it wasn't cheap. It wasn't like this facile thing that like I was supposed to think it was, that I was told to think it was. To me, it was more of just like a fully realized approach to like a band, right? Like this is no longer 3 dudes, 4 dudes, 5 dudes, whatever in a band. This is an entity, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of, at the risk of sounding like wanky, that kind of like transcendence of metal has always resonated with me more, whereas I felt like hardcore's very like local, it's very like it's angst, but it's angst about real things. It's angst about politics or your location or like whatever,
socioeconomic kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we're digging into the real world and we're fighting back. Mm-hmm. And metal has always been like, fuck this, I'm out. It's like, rather than, being present, we're just going to make something better. And I've always had a penchant for escapism. And anyway, I went off on a little bit of a tangent.
But, no, man, that's good. That's good. So, like, let's go back to like those early days. You speak about your fondness for metal, and like what was it that kind of drew you into it in the first place, and what were some of those first bands and records that you remember kind of finding and being like, holy shit, this is it, this is what I've been looking for?
Yes, let's talk. I want to really quick before we segue into that. Mm-hmm. I want to finish the thought about the why I touched on the whole democratic emphasis and like more of the hardcore like worldview and like mentality, where it was kind of like conflated with being like cock rock, whatever, like whatever, like rock star douchebag, who wants to have control over this thing. And to me, when my old band broke up and I was deciding what I wanted to do, which ended up being Vitriol, I was like, okay, what are the bands that I think are most important? Mm-hmm. What bands can I find parallels of what I really want to do, and what do they have in common? And almost not one of them had kind of that democratic creative foundation. And I'm not saying that there haven't been wildly successful bands that are completely collaborative.
Yeah.
But I knew that that's not what was going to work for me. So it was about finding, and this isn't like some shitty whip cracking, like asshole fucking what I say goes thing. It's about finding a couple guys that just, they have that trust, that what is going to be right, not for yourself or your ego, but for Vitriol or X band or whatever.
No, I think that's a good point you make, because like I'm noticing that as a trend lately too. Is like you have this one guy that's in a band that he writes all this stuff, but he just has everybody else kind of play what he wrote, and it's not necessarily like you were saying. It's not like this is my one vision thing. It's just like that's what's more creatively freeing to him to be able to write everything and have other people play it.
Right, and it usually results in a more unified vision, right? Especially if the person has like and I think there's like this stank on these words like vision or artist. It's like this. It's like this, really like, oh, you have to be self-aware. You almost have to be like self-deprecating when saying those things. But like, I'm fine with it. Like, I own it. That's okay.
Yeah. No, I don't think there's anything wrong with that either, man. There's like a weird stigma with like kind of the more elitism crowd in metal that they worry about shit like that, and that's kind of the purpose.
Yeah, and I think there's this like, people are shamed out of identifying themselves as artists in some way. Like it's like some like frivolous thing that you should like, or it's just like there's like it's just a silly thing to call yourself. And I think I wrestled with that for a while, honestly. I'd be like, oh no, I'm not, it's a fucking, and I don't think I was for a while. And I think I was just like a craftsman for a while. Like, and I think that's how we start usually, like as we pick up an instrument or we decide that we want to play music, you start tinkering away, right? You start building your vocabulary. You learn a chord, you learn this, and you're not really a fucking artist, right? You're playing with Legos.
Yeah.
These are building blocks, right? You're not writing poetry when you're learning how to spell your fucking name, Yeah. So, and I think that's the distinction. I think once bands finally learn how to spell their name and learn how to, I hope that if anyone decides to play music, it's because there's something that they want to say. Mm-hmm. And then the process of getting to the point where you feel like you're a musician is when you discover what it is you want to say and you learn how to say it. And that's when it begins, right? That's when you start making real
Art.
I guess that's when music becomes art, when when you're trying to communicate, right? It doesn't have to be this like super romantic thing, this idea. It's like, it's very real, right? It's like, it becomes art when it's no longer just a collage of your influences, like as all of our early work is. Like, anyone who's ever played music, your first attempts is just like your 3 favorite bands, just like stitched together haphazardly.
That's a good point.
And then when you find your own voice and you start saying your own, speaking in that voice, that's when it starts becoming art.
Yeah, there's this thing that I've been noticing too, where like when I'm like doing research for a lot of like these history episodes and listening to all these records or bands that maybe I hadn't heard of before, you do start noticing like these other little influences where it's like, oh, that sounds like that band, but this came out before that band, so maybe this band took that, or it's like a weird melting pot the closer you get to the current era. And every now and then you have those bands that stick out and you're like, okay, that's something different. But my question, or not really question, my thought was always like, well, maybe you need some of those bands that sound like everything else to make the bands that are good stick out more.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong, and there's it's like this almost weird form of like heavy metal classism of like, if a band's not reinventing the fucking wheel, if they're not Deathspell Omega, if they're not fucking Necrophagist, if they're not who the fuck ever, Dimilich, or then who gives a shit? But there's really something to be said about just crafting. Really, I mean, some of my favorite death metal is what I consider to be like craftsman death metal. Just it's not artistic in this sense, in the qualification that we just provided in like the last conversation.
Yeah.
But it's really competently well put together death metal. It's really satisfying meat and potatoes death metal. And this is your Malevolent Creations. This is your Chrysian. This is your, these are bands that like, these are chords, these are primarily riffs we've heard a million times, but they do it with conviction and sincerity and with, they're masters of their craft.
Yeah.
And that's valuable and, noble and sort of like not self-important. I think there's something like, self-important about being creatively adventurous. But
I was talking about that with a friend of mine, because we were talking about a record, and I was like, yeah, it's a great record. It sounds really good, but there are some like pretty, I guess for lack of a better word, cliche riffs, but the band does such a good job making them sound not cliche that it's like, well, does it matter that they're cliche riffs at that point? Like they just sound good again. Yeah.
I mean, that's your fucking, it's about, it has a lot to do with context, and it has a lot to do with conviction, and it has a lot to do with kind of who was doing it first. It's like Killswitch is one of those bands that like, I hear something from them and I'm like, that's fine because it's Killswitch.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, they're one of those bands that can do that syrupy top 40, pop breakdown thing, and it works because it's just Adam D fucking invented the goddamn thing. So of course he's good at it.
Yeah, no shame. I totally saw them like 3 nights ago.
Oh, that's awesome. I saw them. God damn, I saw them with Slayer like, I don't fucking know, 12 years ago or something. It was like Slayer. Oh, Jesus, fuck. What was it? Slayer. I mean, I'm sure I could Google this.
Yeah.
It's like Slayer, Mastodon. No, Slayer, Hatebreed, Lamb of God, and.
That sounds like a tour they would do.
Something like that. Whatever. Yeah. But that band is they're good at what they do. It might not be my thing, but that's fine.
Yeah, I think they were one of those bands that like, I'd always had like a varied taste listening to metal even from the beginning, but they were just one of those bands like when I was younger, like 15 years ago, they just kind of stuck with me. And then I got out of them for a few years, and then I was like, man, maybe I should just go see them, because I never saw them when I was a kid. Now it's like, I'm like 31 years old. I was like, I might as well just go. It's close to me. Fuck it. It was worth it.
So, we're the same age. So I'm 30. So it's, we definitely came up in the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not that I was never, I always resented, I've certainly been accused of being an elitist in the past, but I've always resented that, because I do have, what you would consider to be guilty pleasures that I'm not guilty about. But a lot of the bands that are more melodic, I never really liked melodic metal. Like I couldn't even get into At the Gates and the whole Swedish Gothenburg thing. Because then that, kind of eliminated the whole metalcore thing, subsequent metalcore thing, because that's just what it sounded like.
Yes.
There was something happy about melody and metal that I had a hard time with. But I liked Arch Enemy a lot because Michael Ammett, because I was also a guitar player. So it was like if a band had like a fucking ripping guitar player, especially a great lead guitar player, like I would follow that band. Arch Enemy was one of them. Scar Symmetry is a band that I thought I would never in a million years get into, but Per Nielsen is just a fucking ridiculous player. Yeah, I
think guitar players will like get me more into a band than like anything else. If I know a guy like shreds or can play like some sick riff that you really wouldn't expect to hear, but everything else is just kind of like I'll still probably listen to that band, because that goes a lot longer of a way for me, is the technical aspect.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because people are pretty baffled, especially people close to me, because I almost listen to zero technical music. Like I don't find, I like to be moved when I listen to music, and I don't remember really the last time a hyper technical band has moved me. It's like, it's so masturbatory. It's just like, here's the thing. It's most of it is technicality for the sake of technicality.
Yes.
And that's not valuable. You're not contributing anything. You're not offering the listener anything of substance, and now if you can utilize technicality with an aesthetic goal, right? Like for me, bands that inspired me to play more technically, I mean, admittedly, a lot of it was just like young, competitive drive just to be a better guitar player. But for me, incorporating playing technically into my music, the bands that I loved that really, really scared me, and that was, I think for a lot of us that got into heavy music, is that our first introduction to it, that initial fear, right? It's like our first fucking high, and we're just perpetually chasing that high. Like we want to feel that fear again. And every once in a while, a band comes out, a Death Spell comes out, a Portal comes out, a Gorguts comes out, or whatever band comes out and scares people, shakes people, and they're like, oh fuck, like metal can be heavy again. Metal can be alien again. Metal can feel foreign to me again,
Yeah, it's really rare when like a band or a record like that comes around. It's
oh god, it's so profoundly rare. I mean, that's when that's something you can really hang your hat on. If you can disrupt that, like you were talking about, the necessity of the copycats, because who knows what the world would look like if everyone was a fucking genius, but it would be loud. It'd be a loud place, that's for sure. But there are bands, like, good things come of trends, right? I'm not I don't want to commit to saying that.
Yeah.
Good things come. Again, like I said, I think there's value in making a competent album within a pre-established style of music, you know, and there are bands that have done that really well. You know, fucking, I don't know why I'm citing technical death metal bands after I talked about not listening to them, but just because I said Necrophagist earlier, what comes to mind is, you know, Obscura is a great band that literally came from that band and did something great for themselves. Again, a band that's not band I regularly listen to, but are, you know, very good at what they do. But I don't think anyone could claim that that might be a controversial claim, that Obscura isn't reinventing the wheel. But I think that because you're just progressive doesn't mean you're inherently reinventing the wheel. Like, you know, strong arming, like complicated runs and melodic death metal riffs and weird prog sections isn't necessarily like inherently reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, it's just kind of putting it in a different format, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the other thing too, man, is that, you know, speaking of how, like, when a good record comes around, half the time it's a record that gets unnoticed. And then, like, 10 years later, somebody like, oh, man, this record changed the face of metal and nobody even knew it.
Yeah.
Because nobody paid attention to it when it came out because it was so weird. Gorguts especially, that's the one band that comes to my mind when I think about, like, what happened to them.
Oh, yeah.
Shelved in 93, didn't come out till like 98. Talk about ahead of its time.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. And I mean, there's no better. I mean, we're in an interesting time, you know, and this is especially relevant, you know, to the content of your channel, but we're in a really interesting time. I was talking to Adam, the bass player in Vitriol. I was like, man, do you realize that if we achieve what we're endeavoring to achieve, you know, and we get Vitriol to be on the level of my hope, my dream, like best case scenario would be among the ranks of like the next generation of immolations, suffocations, etc., you know, like, you know, we'll really be like this, arguably like the second generation of death metal, you know what I mean? Like our father's generation were the deaths, were the possessed, you know, like, you know what I mean? So it was like, that's pretty wild. Like to think that this thing that I've spent well over half my life immersed in is so new. It's almost as young as I am, you know?
Yeah, that's the crazy thing, man, is, you know, every other genre of music's been around for, not ever, but, you know, a good solid half of a century.
Yeah.
And we're barely there. We're like a quarter.
Yeah. And this isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's going to be insane to see what happens. And it's exciting. It's exciting to feel like you're participating in history in a way, you know, in whatever small way you can hope to contribute to it, you know.
I will say this, and I'm not saying this just to kind of like wax your car or anything, but when you guys posted up that playthrough song, I sent it to my friend, and he's like, he's kind of he's not picky, but, you know, he's definitely more into melodic stuff, like you mentioned. Yeah. And he was like, "Fuck, dude, that was crazy. That was good." And I was like, "Yeah, man. If I'm being honest, I feel like that, given like another record or two, they're gonna be like the next big wave of death metal bands." And he was like, "Yeah, I can fucking 100% see that." And that's not something I would ever think he would say. So, I think you guys are like the next generation, like you were saying. Like it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and we'll see, man. Like we've been plugging away at this. Where there's some, you know, I'm not being like a defeatist about it. You know, there's no sign of me stopping. I'm in a fucking 30, and I've been banging my head against the wall with this shit since I was 16. So, you know, I'm not stopping anytime soon. But, yeah, there is a bit of a Vitriol curse. You know, like we've discussed deals pretty in depth with 3 separate labels over the years, and all 3 of them have just fucking ghosted.
Jeez.
Like 70% of the way into like negotiations, just stopped responding emails. Like I sent 3, 4, 5 follow-up emails, just fucking nothing. Cold shouldered.
That's fucked up.
Can't get management, can't get a booking agent. So I don't know. It's cool because it's like, it just kind of lights more of a fire in me to be like, all right, fuck all of you. You know what I mean? Like, especially because the press surrounding the EP, when we released Pain Will Define Their Death digitally by ourselves last year, press surrounding that was so strong. And I remember thinking like, man, I think we really made it happen, because Vitriol actually had a release before Pain Will Define Their Death that came out in 2000. Oh shit. 2015, I don't remember.
Yeah.
2014, 15, called the Antichrist EP. And that was, we were talking to a label about that after that, and then the band fell apart, and there was this whole thing, and then, yeah, when we released Pain Will Define Their Death, like Decibel, it was just crazy sound, like that you feel like you couldn't pay to have someone say about your band, right? And it was like, oh, fucking surefire, right? Like bold claims like this, I think Decibel said something like, hey, the most intimidating death metal band in the last 10 fucking years or something like that. And I'm just like, oh, hell yeah. Like, for, seal of approval. And just crickets, man. Just fucking nothing, And it was like, even Eric at Unique Leader, rest in peace.
Yeah, man, that's unfortunate.
It is extremely unfortunate. That was he passed the day we released our playthrough video, and that was hard for me because it was like such a dark cloud over. I didn't know him personally, but early 2000s Unique Leader, like late 90s, early 2000s Unique Leader was, unique grinds for unique minds, man. That shit was real good. And Deeds of Flesh, early Deeds of Flesh was phenomenal. That's hard. But anyway, even he was like, we sent him the EP, and I can't remember. It was like, very, very to the point, very businessman, very, do you have any other songs or something like that? Mm-hmm. Okay, just no comments, no thoughts, no remarks about the EP. And so we send him Parting of a Neck, because that had actually been recorded. The single, the playthrough video for the single we just released,
yes,
that was actually recorded like 4 fucking years ago. That was something I was just sitting on because it wasn't there enough in my mind. And it's funny because the response has been really positive, but like to me, I just felt like, especially the production, it's not, if you listen to it back to back to the EP, it doesn't hit quite as hard. Mm-hmm. So I just sat on it. And when we decided to release the EP with Everlasting Spew, they were like, do you have anything you could potentially release to make something like limited? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, oh shit, yeah, actually, like a fully mastered, like high budget recorded single that I just never fucking did anything with. So yeah, I'm glad they brought that up, because that playthrough video, man, is the closest thing to viral we've ever fucking had. Like, it got like 380 shares and like 70,000 views and shit like that. So on Facebook, like my Facebook post, the Vitriol. So yeah, it's cool.
I think people love playthrough videos. Like, those are probably some of like the highest viewed videos I ever see compared to like bands' music videos half the time, because people like seeing you actually playing like what's going to be in the song, having like a visual representation.
Yeah, and I think my initial reaction, my original inkling about a playthrough video was I didn't like it, because most playthrough videos I've seen are just corny as fuck. It's just like, I don't want to see some fucking Kiesel product placement trash, just with some hokey effects. Like, it was more about to be honest, what inspired it was a couple of my buddies when we released it, said, and they meant it in a positive way. And I took it as a compliment, honestly, because I try to use technicality in a way to like overwhelm the listener, like not to show off, but you should feel sort of lost listening to it in a way. And my buddy was like, that verse riff, man, he said, I have no idea what the fuck is going on, and it's awesome, you know? And I was like, cool, like that's a compliment, but also like these riffs are not just noise, like they're meticulously slaved over, you know? So it inspired me to be like, all right, is there a way that I can put these riffs into visual context? Like, so people will be like, oh, that's what that sound is. Oh, that's a run. Oh, that's a triplet run, or that's a fucking tremolo, or that's a whatever, you know, especially with guitar, because we're not a conventionally technical band. You know, we're not like MIDI clean. We're not, you know, Berkeley fucking wank dudes, you know? Yeah. So, I think we get overlooked by the tech dudes, and that's fine because they're probably not going to like our music anyway. But I think that this opened. I mean, there were people that even followed Vitriol before that saw that video because the EP doesn't have any solos on it. And we're just like, oh, fuck, like, I didn't know you played guitar. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, shit, like, that's some wild fucking shit. And I'm like, yeah, man, like, if you care to listen, you know, it's like and I get it. And that's why, I mean, this is exactly why technical bands opt for the really squeaky clean, grid edited, quantized production, because they want to make sure you hear every little note that they slaved over in their Guitar Pro, clicking their little MIDI blocks around, you know, like they want to make sure you hear every single fucking last one. And I get that, but it's just results in a very empty experience.
Yeah, no, I think it takes away a lot of the authenticity of it, you know, because you're not making those mistakes. You're not having that like raw kind of aggression of actually playing the song live, so to speak. It's just like, right. Oh, I messed up. Well, I can fix it.
Yeah. Well, they don't even have it live, you know. It's like these are bands that, you know, it's so many bands don't. I mean, death metal has become so fucking diseased and just emaciated. Like there's no fire or passion. There's no expectation. Like I'm very self-aware that I make faces or whatever. Like people, or when people comment on my videos. I mean, I've been playing live music since I was 17. I've been hearing it since then. And for me, it was never something I attempted to do. It was never something that I was like, oh, I'm going to be a ham. Mm-hmm. You know, it was just like making music was an emotional thing for me. And making music is an emotional thing for me. And I took that in the true sense of the word for granted, right? And I assumed that anyone else that was making music had a similar relationship with making it. That you're making it because it moved you. And I let it move me. And like, you look at, this isn't like this alien idea, right? Like, look at any other fucking genre of music. Look at a live performance from any big name in their genre and tell me if they're sitting there with their backwards fucking baseball cap on, fucking staring down at their shoes with their fucking guitar up on their chest doing this. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, who, like, no, like, let it, it's not... It's just, it's an insane thing to me that when people within extreme metal are confronted with impassioned playing, they think it's bizarre and they don't know what to do with it. They think it's funny, or they think it's awesome, or like it's a really polarizing thing. Like if people are like, oh, you're being over dramatic, or people are like, oh my God, it's so refreshing to see someone fucking play with some feeling, you know?
Yeah.
So it's one or the other.
It is weird too how people just like nitpick about the weirdest little things like that. Like, oh no, he's making a weird face. So what? Maybe he's just like in the moment.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't waste any time even considering the reasons for those it's such a waste of your own time, you know. It's people that just need something to say. You know, I think there was even a comment on the YouTube one about the living room being like Oh, really metal living room, guys.
Oh my god.
I was like, what the fuck? Like, what an interesting thing to critique.
I mean, what do they expect it to be covered in blood and goat's horns everywhere? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
Upside down crosses?
Jesus, yeah, we're not fucking sorry. Black Craft Cult didn't fucking sponsor our fucking music video. Jesus.
Oh man, you know what's funny? I would love to get your opinion on this because you were talking about, you know, like bands playing live performances and not really putting their all into it. Yeah. I witnessed a band recently that is I'm not going to name them because I don't want to like burn that bridge, I guess, but they're a pretty big band in their respective genre, and I watched them play to a fucking backing track. They were not even playing their own instruments.
Oh yeah, of course not. I'll burn that bridge. You just fucking send that to me in a sweet little DM, and I'll fucking oust them right now. I don't give a fuck.
I don't either. Like, I definitely put it out there on the social media stuff. I didn't really name them, but if you like follow me at what show I was at, it's pretty obvious to figure out who the fuck it was. But
yeah, I mean, it's not. I don't even really fucking care because I really expected at this point from all those bands. Like I know Avenged Sevenfold was doing that really early in their career. They were doing that when they're Warped Tour band. The only thing that they were playing live was, I know this from an inside source who did that tour. And the only thing that was live was the guitar solos and the vocals.
Damn.
The drums and all rhythm guitars were backing track.
That is crazy.
So they could perform was the idea, you know? So they didn't have to worry about fucking watching their hands every time they wanted to move up 2 frets for that. I get the... I don't know. I think it's kind of on us, man. I think it's kind of on us as consumers to like expect to hold arena bands to. I mean, I don't know. I assume the band you're talking about wasn't a fucking arena band.
No,
right?
No, definitely not.
Okay, so there's no excuse for them.
It was just weird, man. Because like I spent time touring with the band, albeit in like a merch capacity for a number of years, and that was not a thing that ever crossed my mind, is to see a metal band do that. And now I just like, I felt like so naive. Yeah, I felt so naive the other night. I was like, why would they do this? Like,
fuck! I really want to know who this is, man.
I'll definitely tell you afterwards.
Okay.
Or actually, no, I can just cut it out. It was.
Oh, I buy that. Yeah, that doesn't shock me at all.
Yeah, like the dude gets on stage, all their guitar parts start going, and he's literally not even touching his guitar. And I just looked at my friend, and I was like, "Are you seeing this?" He's like, "Yeah, he's not playing anything." I was like, "How is this even like going over people's heads right now?" I'm so kind of just like in shock myself. And I was
that's
like, fucking joke.
The world we fucking live in, man. I mean, that's guitar. Guitar is dead, dude. It's like, I don't know. I have a Instagram account where I talk about guitars a lot.
That was one thing I definitely want to talk to you about, because every time you post a guitar and you have something to say about it, I'm like, yes, this is awesome. I want to know more about all of this.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. So you've seen it, and I'm a passionate dude about it. And that kind of bleeds. I mean, they're not, that and Vitriol are not one and the same, but there is a correlation. There's a relationship with the two. And, obviously my philosophies are represented in both. And there's just, with this movement, and I feel torn, right? I feel like I'm this weird centaur creature in the world of extreme metal guitar playing, because the music that I like, and I think the metal that's being made honestly, is not particularly athletic metal, right? Instrumentally speaking.
Yeah.
They're not like virtuosic players. And that's fine. You don't need to be to make incredible heavy music.
I agree.
And then you have all these other bands that have the technical prowess but are creatively starved, right? Or spiritually starved, or whatever, however you want to put it. You know, they're just like, there's no substance. So it's like, and here I am, like, kicking and screaming, being like, you can do both. Like, you're allowed to do both. Like, you can, and I'm going to show you, you know? And that's what I try to be. And it's easy for someone to look at Vitriol, especially us play live, and be like, oh, they're a technical death metal band. And it's like, fuck you. Like, maybe by definition, we are technical and we are a death metal band, but by genreification, by no means are we like a tech death band. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because that's not the spirit of the band.
Yeah, I think a lot of the subgenre stuff has gotten like way out of hand. It should not be that ridiculous to try and describe a band sound. It's either metal or death metal, or it's not.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's like we want to reject all these things, but at the same time, we sort of have to like play into it because there's a necessity to like the nuances that they provide. Mm-hmm. You know, especially if like you're a big connoisseur of extreme, you know, or underground metal. It's like if you're trying to speak to another person and you need like these subcategories, like, so where do you go from there? You know what I mean? I think the problem isn't that the acknowledgement of the subgenres. It's the weird. It's when they're used as ammunition. You know, when people are like tribalistic about their subgenres, and there's like a hierarchy of subgenres. Like, that's when it becomes like toxic and a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely like I don't know. I guess this kind of ties back to the elitism thing, man, because like you were saying, people are so stuck on like one kind of music, and if it isn't that kind of music, then it's not metal to them, so to speak. And I don't understand like how people can kind of, I guess, not let themselves enjoy every bit of music that's out there. I feel like you're depriving yourself of all the other stuff that you could be listening to just because it's not your genre.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that the dissonance there, right, like the failure to communicate within our own culture about these ideas, is because just like with anything else, I imagine any other like musical subculture that is subgenre that's also a subculture, mm-hmm. right? And like that's what metal is. It's not just a style of music. It's you know, it's a lifestyle, brother. But you know, I'm being, you know, silly, but I'm sincere. Fuck, God damn it, help me out. What was I just gonna say?
Just the way people kind of treat subgenres and like the elitism within that.
Yeah. Okay. So the issue is that I think, you know, you strike me as a guy that you have an honest appetite for heavy music and just music and art, probably. Yep. Right. You're probably a naturally relatively eclectic guy. Like, is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Okay. So yeah. That's because you have an honest desire to experience those things. But the dark truth of metal is that so many of quote unquote us, right? I say in air quotes, are here for the social benefit, the tribal benefit of being a part of something, of aligning yourself with something, right? And I think the quickest indicator, the most surefire indicator of who's here because they're interested in the music, or who's here because they want to play dress up and sit at the table, whatever, is how open-minded they are. Because people that are here with tribal motivations, their worst nightmare is alienating themselves from the tribe. And what quicker way to alienate yourself from, you know, the most fucking harsh, one of the most harshly, oh God, I'm not going to say
judgmental.
I'm not going to use political terms. Yeah, sure. That's a soft word. That's a really soft word. But for lack of a better word, let's say judgmental. Mm-hmm. subgenres, you know, so you have to cling to these things where like, oh, this band sucks, or even if there's a band. So let's say you got your typical Hesher old school death metal revival dude. He's got his white Reebok high tops on, his acid wash jeans, his, you know, like sleeveless incantation or Demolit shirt or what the fuck ever, you know. And maybe, you know, maybe that's his main deal. That's dope. That's cool. That's your thing. That's your main fucking, that's your voice. That's what you connect with. But maybe through the periphery, there was something you heard, like maybe there was like a deathcore band or a punk band or a fucking power metal band. You know, maybe you heard fucking Manowar one day and it was like something where you're like, oh, you know, you have a decision to make, like you, whether to be, so to backpedal. I think the claim I'm trying to make is that those people don't, I really fundamentally don't, I believe they don't really have a relationship with the music in the first place.
Okay.
I don't think they really like the music. I think the bands that they like, the shirts that they wear, the flags that they fly are just, they're checking the little boxes of the membership card of whatever people they want to hang out with. And that's why I have very few friends within the scene. Like I had close friends for a while, and I within the scene up here that I had to alienate myself from because it was that toxic fucking, it's just so juvenile, the whole thing, the fucking tribalistic, what you're allowed to like, what you're not allowed to like.
Yeah, it seems to defeat the purpose. I definitely experienced a little bit of that myself because I lived in Olympia, Washington for like a year and a half, and yeah, the music scene there was just, it was terrible for lack of a better description. Yeah. And it was just like, yeah, all these people that were too worried about, like you were saying, like what they looked like, what they had to sound like, and not really just like enjoying anything about the music.
Yeah, I mean, they're easy to spot. They're the ones that look the coolest, likely spent the most time getting ready. They're the ones standing outside the venue. They're only inside the venue for the band that they're hanging out with. And then even then, they're probably in there for half of their set and in the bar for the rest of it.
Yeah.
You know, it's a party, right? And the music is the backdrop. It's the fucking soundtrack. It's not the primacy of the music is what I'm about, you know, and I think that it's rare. Excuse me. Excuse me.
All good.
It's rare that you find people interested in heavy music that feel that way. You know, it's rare to find an open-minded metalhead. And we all, I mean, everyone says that they are, but very rarely are people truly.
Hey, don't get me wrong. There are bands that I shit on for sure. But
yeah, and here's the thing too, is like it's not about liking everything.
Yeah,
and that's the thing, is like if you're, and that's where, you know, the term contrarian comes from. If like we're being contrary for the sake of being contrary, you're just one side of the same shitty fucking coin. Like you're no better than the person that does everything that they're supposed to, that's expected of them, or modeling themselves after another person. If you're modeling your identity after the antithesis of someone you dislike, you're still a fucking sheep. Mm-hmm. You're just a mirror of one, you know? You're still letting someone dictate it. So you get that, you get all of like the false, like righteous metalheads are like into like really obscure shit and into really unexpected shit. So I guess like meeting someone who's just genuinely like, they have opinions, and you can like bands that you're supposed to like and dislike bands you're supposed to dislike and like bands you're supposed to dislike, and so on and so on and so forth. I just think it's really easy. Like once you meet people who just have a sincere appreciation, how they speak about music too. Those people usually aren't capable of speaking about, like, you want to fucking, I hate to use the word, I'm going to unabashedly use the word poser. You want to spot a fucking poser? when you're talking about a band you like, ask them like, what fucking, what's your favorite fucking riff?
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Like, what's your favorite riff? Not to like call them out, not to like, don't be a douche, don't be like a virtue signaling fucking asshole that's like trying to flex on someone or like punk someone out if you don't think they know something. That's shitty. Mm-hmm. But it's like, I know when I can talk to someone who likes music because they fucking like music. They probably listened actively, right? And they probably developed an intimate relationship with an album or a song, and you can talk about that relationship with them. Like, how did this part move you? Like, when that fucking snare comes in, like when I get excited about music, I'm like, oh, fucking, like 2 minutes in, when that fucking, he comes in and it's that hi-hat and it's just, and it opens up right there. It's like, someone who doesn't give a shit can't have that conversation with you. And those are the people that I care to have conversations with about music,
Yeah.
Not the person who's making fun of someone's t-shirt from across a fucking venue. You know what I mean? Like, fuck that guy.
That's how me and my best friend are. Every time we hang out, we kind of show each other new music, and we'll sit there and be like, yo, listen to this part. Listen to when he does this with the guitar. Listen to this little, like, riff section right here. And it's like, damn, that's cool. That's cool. It's so fun. It's so fun.
That's why the circle continues spinning. Like, that's the apex.
Yeah.
Right. This is a cycle of like the creation and digestion of music is a cycle because it is, right? We make it and we hear it, and then we hear it as kids, and it inspires us to make it, and so on and so forth. Why we do it, that checkpoint, the purpose, the moment of purpose, the moment of consequence is you sitting in a room with your buddy, whether you're just relaxing, smoking, doing whatever, and letting the efforts of those artists work on you. And being like, oh, fuck, like someone slaved over this riff to be unexpected. Someone slaved over to this section to be extra heavy, to create impact. This person probably sat in a studio for a week trying to figure out how to make this part as heavy as it possibly could be, just so he could knock you and your friend on your fucking ass in your mom's living room or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, that's the whole point. And if you're not doing that, if you don't have that relationship with music, and if you ever lose that relationship with music, like, hang it up, man.
Yeah, that now that we're talking about this, I was kind of thinking back to when I first got into metal, and it was always that way for me. Anytime I would show somebody a song or a band, it was like, well, listen to this song and listen to this part right here and tell me that doesn't, like, change your mind. And, like, 85% of the time they'd be like, oh, shit, you're right. And then the other 15, they'd be like, yeah, it's just not my thing. I'm not into this. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. Next time, I'll get you something else. I got it.
Or I'm sure you've encountered people that simply maybe not are incapable, but are disinterested in thinking about music in that way, or
absolutely
having a depth of relationship with music in that way. And that's fine, right? Like, not all of us are obligated to have a really refined palate in what we eat. So it's like, if we choose to be really into music, that's on us. It's not everyone else. But lost my train of thought again.
It's all good. I think we're doing good here anyways. Like, this is it's been a good conversation. Yeah, I'll give you a good example here. One of my roommates, he's a lot younger than me. He's like 22. He's been more recently getting into metal, but like everything that I'll show him or tell him to check out, he's been 100% completely open-minded, been like, damn, okay, this is pretty cool. Like, what else do you got? And I'll show him stuff, and he's like completely receptive to it, where I feel like most other 22-year-olds would be like, what is this shit? Get it out of here. I want to listen to Black Veil Brides or something like that.
You sure? Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, it's hard because it's like, it's hard to even have an issue with it. Like, I don't care. I'm not bothered that there are people that don't want to have that relationship with music. Mm-hmm. if you are operating on, if anyone's listening that is invested in extreme music and you go to shows or you talk to other people that are into similar bands, do not waste any time lying to yourself, thinking that you have anything more in common with these people than some of the bands that you like.
Yeah.
Take it from someone who, you know, I resent a lot of metal culture, you know, and I think people make the mistake of trying to form relationships on superficial commonalities. You know, like, oh, you like Slayer? I like fucking Slayer. Cool. Sweet. Yeah, I like Slayer. And it's like 3 weeks in, you like Slayer because of the fucking riffs, and they like Slayer because they're talking about Auschwitz. You know, it's like, oh, whoops. Like,
dude, that's hilarious. That is the exact point as I was going to make.
You know, so it's like, it's, you know, it's whatever. I mean, I love Slayer, but you know, that wasn't a shot at Slayer. I don't need that fucking going around. I have a Slayer tattoo, but my point being is, you know, it's not this whole like brothers in metal or fucking whatever. It's just, I don't know. I mean, I don't run into that within like a lot of the music that I consume or the subcultures I'm exposed to. It's usually very obnoxiously exclusive, but yeah, I just don't.
I mean, in the end, it should be just about the music itself, no matter what. That's why we all kind of listen to this genre anyways, is because of the way it makes us feel outside of our normal lives, because a lot of people can't really relate to it, and I think that's why it's more important to us than a regular person, so to speak.
But it's not, though. That's the problem, you know what I mean? It's not. That's not why we all listen to it. Like, that's why you listen to it, and that's why I listen to it. But that's why, like, the majority of people that listen to this shit, that's not why they're listening to it. You know, they're listening to it because it's a fucking, it's a open seat. You know, it's like, it's a fucking, they get to be a part of something. You know, and it's accessible. You don't need much. You just have to fucking look the part, speak the part. You know, it's not an expensive thing to get into. So, I mean, I think that's the problem is like promoting this false community that we're like, oh, well, at the end of the day, we're all here for the same. Like, no, we're fucking not. Like 90% of the people here are just here to be seen. They're here to take an Instagram photo and fuck off. Yeah. They're here to fucking, you know, stand behind stage, do a line of coke off the fucking urinal and hang out at the bus in the back. You know what I mean? Like, they're not here for the fucking music. So few of us are here for the fucking music. Why do you think the best bands in metal are buried into fucking obscurity, and the only people that know about them are dudes that are geeky enough like me to make metal, or geeky enough like you to make a blog about it?
Yeah.
You know? So it's like, if people cared about the music, we would live in a much different world.
Yeah, I stand corrected there. You got me on that one. I can't.
I didn't mean to chime.
No. You made excellent points there that I can't even like say you're wrong about, because it's, I guess I spend so much time kind of thinking about like my outlook on it that I do forget that other people have different outlooks on it, and I think that's just with life in general. A lot of times, I forget that people have other outlooks.
Yes, you need the imagination to consider inferior worldviews, you know, and ideally superior worldviews as well, you know, but, you know, practicing that kind of like empathy of perspective. And I think for me, it was a realization. It was just like an inevitable realization, because I was like I said, I'm sure you felt the friction of like trying to connect with someone about music, and you're just not, it's just not firing the way that you thought it would. Like, your excitement isn't being met with more excitement, you know what I mean? And it's just kind of falling flat and someone's not engaging with you, you know? I think I couldn't figure that out. Like, why is this happening? Like, what, aren't we all here for the, same thing. You just take it for granted, like same that when I started touring as a musician in my first band, I remember that blew me the fuck away. Like, I thought this whole myth of the dude that just starts a band to live the lifestyle and go on the road and hook up with chicks. Like, I thought that was like a fucking some pejorative myth. Like, I didn't think it was a real thing, and it is.
It absolutely is.
Fucking totally is. And I was like, nah, dude, like, this is metal. Like, we're better than that, right? Like, no, we're in it for the music. If we were here to like hook up, with people, then we'd be playing something a lot sexier than fucking, heavy metal. Evidently not. No. And that was tough. And I think it was also, the genre and the age bracket of my old band and the whole thing made a lot worse. And luckily now I think Vitriol is insulated a bit more, protected more from people that there's something to be said about being quote unquote underground beyond just some like fucking cheap street credibility of obscurity, which is stupid. But I think what it does is it protects you from fair weather fans. Like, if the fans that you have as an underground band and a small band early in your career, those first fans are the most powerful ones because they're the ones that found you through all the shit. They're the ones that sifted you through the sand, and you're the band that cut through the noise for them when they were like going through a fucking SoundCloud rabbit hole or whatever, however they found you.
Yeah, especially in the early days, because now, with everything being so readily available, it's way more flooded than it used to be. So that's even more of like a grain in the sand for somebody to be like, oh, I like this band, and they only have like 300 listens or whatever a month on Spotify or something like that.
Right.
But it's, especially for you guys, like, you're still fairly new, I guess, somewhat. I mean, I know you said 7 years, but
yeah, you can say that. I know it sounds weird to say, but
yeah,
I would say that it feels like 2017 was the launch year for Vitriol, even though we had been a band for 6 years. Mm-hmm. It was just a lot of life, man. A lot of life happened. It was like, in the band that we came from, Vitriol came from the dissolution of the last band, and that band stylistically was very different. So it was a lot of life shit happened. Loved ones died. People went to rehab. A lot of shit happened over the years. People quit the band, rejoined the band, quit the band again. It was a wild for 6 years. But a lot of that was me trying to figure out how to write the music I was hearing in my head, and that's hard. And I think a lot of people just don't have the fucking, I think talent's a myth. I think talent is just an applied interest. It's just like, if you're too lazy to do it until it comes to fruition, like, that's on you, but don't fucking chalk it up to someone being talented and you're not. You're just fucking lazy.
Yeah.
So I think most people wouldn't spend almost their entire 20s toiling away in obscurity in their bedroom for a decade, like, trying to find their fucking sound for a stupid, shitty death metal band that 6 people are gonna like. Like, people don't have that patience, that self-destructive level of focus. So I don't even know where the fuck I was going with that, but
well, I mean, I do think you're onto something there, because it does seem like a lot of, maybe not a lot, but maybe a small group of people that are starting bands are under that illusion that they can just like, oh, because the internet's there, I can just make stuff in my room and put it up on the internet. And the next thing I know, I'll be touring. And no.
Sit the fuck down. Like, that's my advice. Like, I hate, a forewarning. I don't know if this one's locked and loaded for you, but one of my least favorite interview questions is, do you have any advice for other bit? Like, well,
no.
First of all, we have I'm in no position of authority to give advice because I've really experienced very little, conceivable success. But it would be fucking patient and allocate your priorities correctly and understand that having a powerful voice is paramount. And if you don't have that yet, if you listen back to your demo, if you're watching your band practice as your mom drives you home on your smartphone that you recorded and you're cringing, don't book a show. And it's okay to suck.
Yeah.
This isn't about not sucking. This is about sucking and enjoying sucking. Don't enjoy it too much. Hate it enough to stop sucking as soon as possible, but understand it's part of the process. But don't inflict it on us. Don't just pre-cum onto the internet because you want to co-opt the lifestyle of people that actually hard-earned that lifestyle.
Yeah, what's funny is I'm thinking back now, and I have actually witnessed this happen once. I'm sure it's probably happened more, but one of the first tours I did, there was a band that got on our tour package, and they didn't even have their first album out yet, and this was their very first tour, and they were co-headlining it. And I was like, where did this band come from? And they were all just a bunch of 18-year-old rich kids that their parents paid for everything for them, and then that's how they got on the tour. And I was just like, this is outright insulting to some degree. I get that, they've worked hard now to get where they're at. To some respect, they found their niche, but to all of, maybe I'm just kind of speaking out of character here, but maybe to everybody else, it was like, what the fuck is this? Like, why are these guys here? It was weird.
I hear you. I mean, that's a whole other can of worms, you know what I mean? Like, there are people that I don't resent privilege, you know what I mean? And I think, the fact that you have a podcast and that I have the luxury of participating in a podcast tells me that we're both men of at least certain levels of privilege, right? So
I mean, I put every waking moment and cent into this, I will tell you that. So I work hard at it. So yeah,
but I'm saying we're not half of our siblings aren't dead from malaria is what I'm saying.
True.
You know what I mean? So I guess what I'm saying, it's a spectrum. I don't resent people for having money. I don't resent kids. I don't resent kids that had parents that were supportive of their dream. I don't resent kids that were allowed to, graduate high school and fucking stay at home and have a home studio in the basement, Mm-hmm. What I do resent is people who don't take advantage of those privileges. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? When they take them for granted and they piss on them, or they just use the money as leverage and not as what it should be, a luxury of time. Because, what's money if not time, right?
Yeah, so absolutely.
You just have more time to work on your craft. So, I know, I'm not going to name names, but I know of specifically a guy who, a very successul band, he's the brains behind that band, and he comes from an affluent family, has really never had to work, did high school, committed to guitar, but that motherfucker is one of the more prolific bands because he squeezes that fucking juice, man. You know what I mean? He takes advantage of every opportunity that, his parents he's been fortunate enough to be provided to him. So that doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
So bands kind of get shit on for that, and I think that sucks. It's weird and classist, and you have to be a poor struggle. You have to be this emaciated, suffering fucking like Sex Pistols rehashed behind the music story to be like legitimized as a musician. And I think that's a stupid idea, you know?
I do think there's a little bit more, I guess, I know I already used this word, but I guess authenticity to the struggle, you know, like it comes from a more like raw place of like, yeah, I had to work hard for this and put everything into it, and you kind of didn't. And I'm not saying that that's a bad or a good thing, but I think that it goes farther in the music, and not just music, but life in general. You know, I know it pushes me a lot of times, where it's like, shit, I got to work harder just to do whatever this thing that I want to do, and you know, maybe this person doesn't, but I don't know that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just really the school of like, nobody gives a fuck about your efforts, man. Like,
oh yeah.
Nobody gives a shit. I don't care. Like, especially as a songwriter, it's like some of the strongest songs I've written were I almost wrote in the length of time that they are long, you know? And then there are songs I spent 11 months on, you know? And it's like, does that matter to the listener? Does the listener give a fuck? No. How hard that was for me? If I want to sit here on my high horse being like, ooh, a heady fucking technical death metal band and shit on like pop bands or whatever, and I have an affection for pop music, I wouldn't. But if I wanted to, it just like, nobody cares, man. Like, it's why I don't like jazz. Like, that's all I can think when I'm listening to jazz. It's like, nobody fucking cares. Like, I get that's cool to you and like that's interesting to you from your perspective, but you're not saying anything to me. You're not communicating to me. You're speaking at me. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't like a two-way thing, and that's what art should be.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be the solitary, isolating thing. No, I'm just going to talk about jazz because I don't know what the fuck I was talking about. I had, at the beginning, full disclosure, the beginning of this year, I had some really serious health problems. I had a perforated intestine. I spent several months in the hospital. And I spent my entire life sober. And then through my 2.5 months of hospitalization and a few abdominal surgeries, I became addicted to my pain medication, and was able to kick that, which is great, but needed to be replaced because the pain is real with something else. So I'm dealing with newfound weed brain.
Okay.
Like, smoked weed before, like since I was a little kid. Like, I think the last time I smoked weed was like, I was like 13 years old. So like at 30 years old, I'm like, what's an indica? What is a sativa? You know, I'm like, I have no fucking idea. Yeah, it's funny.
That's a hell of a struggle, man. I know this is kind of a, you know, we don't know each other, but congratulations on like kicking that habit, man. That's not an easy thing to do.
Thanks. No, it's not. It was I wouldn't say I've necessarily lived an easy life, but that was by a landslide the most harrowing experience of my life. And it was so important because a big part of my sobriety throughout my adult life had been because it wasn't like a straight edge thing. It wasn't a cultural thing. Like, I was sober before I knew about hardcore or anything. And again, I didn't really participate in the hardcore culture. So yeah, it wouldn't really have been a symptom of that anyway. But like, my mother passed from abuse of pain medication, my father to alcoholism, you know, godmother to AIDS from sharing needles. It was just like, I got a lot of firsthand, before he was even old enough to begin to romanticize the use of drugs. I just got to see the horror of it really, really early on. And I think I was really angry about it for a really long time. And I didn't realize that I didn't even realize that I needed to forgive them until I went through it, until I experienced what that's like to be at the mercy of something like that, and to know how powerless you are, and to know how selfish it makes you, and how completely removed you are. And coming out of it, I was just like, it was like almost drowning. It was like thinking you were going to drown. You're seeing spots. Your fucking pant leg is caught to the bottom of the lake, and you think it's over. And a miracle, you break away. And that first breath of air, it's like, all I could think was like, so much sympathy and love and sadness and compassion for like everyone in my life that I lost to substance abuse, you know?
Yeah.
Up in a really white trash neighborhood, it was like, 50% of the kids I grew up with are dead, And I think I used to look down on them, from a high horse for a really long time. And people don't appreciate the gravity of that shit until you're fucking in it.
What was it that kind of like, I guess, pulled you out of it, man? Like, what kept you going through all that? Because I'm sure it could have been, easy to like just want to give up, but you managed to like get through it.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That's hard. I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time evaluating that because it feels kind of masturbatory. Like, I don't know what's to be found there, and like being like, oh, what virtue am I equipped with? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think I just had, even though my identity was gone, I had a lingering intolerance to, I couldn't. So what happened? I got to the point where, people in my position, like what happened to me is not a unique story. Mm. It happens to a staggering amount of, it's an epidemic. It's a full-blown qualified epidemic. So this is a tale as old as Vicodin has been around, opiates have been around. So you get hooked on the pain pills. You usually leave the hospital with an addiction that you don't know about, right? Yeah. So because they don't wean you off of it, at least not the hospital I went to. And then they write you a prescription, obviously, for more. So you just keep going. And then every time you get off of it, I mean, I'm not going to go into the science of it, but it's the recklessness and irresponsibility in which they dispense opiates is devastating. But anyway, I got to the point where, eventually they stopped filling your prescription because eventually like a reasonable period of time has passed. I'm like, it is what it is and you shouldn't need it anymore. And that's totally reasonable and fair. So then if you decide you rationalize that you need more because you're still in pain, and that you feel sick without it and you feel like you want to die without it and yada, yada, yada. So you start buying it on the street. So I was buying my pain pills on the street. I was snorting them as well. I was not even taking them orally anymore. So I got to the point where I was going through so much money. I'd finally ran out of money. I had a decent savings before I got sick, and I'd burnt through it doing that. And then when I got to that point, that was the moment where people in my position go to heroin or they stop.
Yes.
And I just would never let myself, whatever was left of me at that point, which was not much. I'm just grateful for that version of me that didn't let me get to that point. I would have rather died 100%. Like my suicide note was written like several times over. Like I was fucking very sick of being sick. I'd never been suicidal in my life, and it always sounded like such a sad sack thing to me. Like, oh, I'm so miserable. I just want to die. And I was like, you kind of look at that with contempt, disdain, and weakness. But I think a lot of people, I imagine a lot of people that get to that point, it's out of exhaustion. Yeah. It's not sadness. You're just tired, man. Like, you're just like, you don't even have the energy to wake up anymore. Like, you'd wake up and you're crying. Like, you wake up and just the pain of consciousness brings you to tears. It's like, it's so miserable to even be alive. And the problem was I had gotten off, I'd kicked the pills for like 6 weeks at a time once, and it was just fucking misery. And then I got back on them because I thought that was proof that, like, that's what wasn't causing the issue, and I still needed them because I was so sick, whatever. And the doctors didn't give a shit. Like, the second they catch a whiff that, like, anything is going on, they'd fucking drop you. They're just like, hands off, hot potato. Like, I don't want anything to do with you. But they had me on like 50 milligrams of prednisone a day for like steroids for like 5 fucking months, which is a lot of fucking steroids.
Yeah.
Really long time. And they had me on gabapentin. They had me on fucking antidepressants. They had me on clonidine. They had me on just this fucking pharmaceutical cocktail, right? And I got to a point where I kicked the pills and I was off opiates for another. I had done the 6 weeks once, got back on them because I was a month and a half of fucking hell. There's nothing like, you think you're fucking hard. If you think you're a hard man, woman, person, whatever, develop a severe chemical dependency to opiates and kick it cold turkey. And that will fucking level you. There is nothing that will humble you like opiate withdrawal. I've never felt so small in my fucking life.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of movies, especially, like, somewhat romanticize that.
Oh my God, right? Oh my God. It's so, I mean, like, and even when they try to do it, it's like...
Still miles off, I'm sure.
Yeah, man. It's like a dude sweaty, like, rolling around for, like, 7 seconds before they cut to a scene of him, like... the sweat glistening off his back as he dry heaves into a bucket. It's like, no, it is fucking... I mean, words fail. It's the really genuinely, sincerely the first experience I've had that words truly fail me. Yeah. It's, yeah.
I the only thing that I can relate to is I was, with somebody that was also kind of dealing with opiate addiction, and they were trying to kick it too, and it was just a constant battle. And watching, somebody who doesn't personally or never experienced that, watching somebody go through it is equally as heartbreaking, knowing all the pain that they're in and what they're suffering through, and you can't do anything about it at all.
It seems so simple, like the answer's right there in front of them, and it's like, to be the spectator. I mean, I spent my entire life as a fucking spectator. Mm-hmm. I spent my entire life hating my friends and family for self-destructing willfully. And I just didn't get it.
Yeah.
Because I was fortunate enough to never have let its talons fucking cleave themselves into me, until that point in time. And I had the wisdom to avoid, to drop alcohol. I smoked weed, experimented with some harder drugs really young, drank until I was about 15, and then quit everything because I was just like, my fucking granddad, my great granddad, my biological father, all to alcoholism,
Yeah.
I was like, fuck that, dude. I'm not, all the willpower in the world doesn't make me smarter than 3 generations of fucking death by alcohol. You know what I mean? So it's like, I just know genetically that, like, I've been even toyed around. I'm not like ethically opposed to drinking even. It's not like a thing I have a position on. Like the idea of sharing a beer with a buddy sounds nice, but I just know genetically that's a loaded gun in my fucking mouth. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
you're very self-aware of like what could happen because of what you've witnessed.
Yeah, and I know it will. I mean, not only just genetically from my parents, but from I'm an escapist, man. It's the same reason why I got into death metal. This world sucks, you know. It's shit. We're shit, and the only noble thing to do is like abandon it, I guess. And I feel like that's what you do with death metal, you know. It's the abandonment of life, the human experience, and drugs. I mean, will always go hand in hand with art. It's not a coincidence. It's not a cliche. It's because they both serve the same purpose. They're both vessels. You know what I mean? Like they're to transport you to a better reality. You know, a more preferable one.
Yeah.
So that's why you can't fuck with drugs, man. Like, because if you give someone who's chronically sad something that makes them happy, try to take it away from them.
They will fight or die trying.
Bite your fucking hand off.
Yeah.
You know? And that's what it was for me. It was like, you couldn't tell me I was wrong. I don't give a shit. Like, I don't care. If you told me that shit was going to kill me in 5 years, I don't give a fuck. You know, it was like, it wasn't until it stopped working. It wasn't like some sense of like, oh, I'm better than this. It was like, I'm just miserable now. And that's why, you know, that's the deal with the devil of hard drugs is like, you know, it's like the sweetest honeymoon phase of your fucking life for about 2 weeks, you know. I think that's, if you're hitting shit hard, if you're habitual, if you're like if you're a local, you know, to that neighborhood, I think it takes about 2 weeks of almost anything, and then it's downhill. You know, how quickly that happens depends on what you're doing and how often, but it just gets worse until the stages are, holy shit, how did I live without it for about 2 weeks, to, okay, I'm sustaining, to, oh, I'm taking this just to cling to some level of function, to, I think I'm gonna fucking die. And that happens so fucking quick, you know. And it gets you. I mean, I was talking to a buddy of mine, his lady who's 5 years sober off heroin, and she was like, yeah, she's older, she's early 40s.
Okay.
And she's like, yeah, I was fucking 35, fucking had my own catering company, drove a Jaguar, whatever, you know. Same story. Got some crazy fucking surgery, pain pills, hooked. She said within 12 months of like running her own catering company, having the whole lifestyle, being successful young woman, she was homeless, 90 pounds, fucking doing whatever she could to score, you know?
Yeah.
So no one, like, this shit is not classist, you know? Like, it doesn't care if you're white trash. It doesn't care if you're a soccer mom. It doesn't care if you're, you know, a fucking lawyer or a doctor. You know, it'll fucking get you, you know?
I wonder if a lot of that kind of ties into like how we try to kind of escape and numb from life a lot of times, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Albeit somewhat accidental, you know, obviously you didn't purposely like try to get on pain medication, or neither did she, but to some extent, like, it made you feel better for a short time, and it wasn't, it fucked everything up.
Well, Right. That's the thing. Like I heard that kind of like that weighted like breath before you said. I mean, it helps. It's not like you're almost afraid to acknowledge that there was a benefit to it, and like that's like this weird stigma around like, you know, coming off of an addiction is like you don't want to say that drugs are awesome, like, but at the end of the day, like we get addicted to them not because they're fucking shitty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's a reason why we fucking blow up our lives for this shit, you know? So, and it's not to say that it's worth it. Of course it's not worth it. Like, of course it's not worth it. It's never fucking worth it. Ever. You know, like, just don't even try. Are there people, do I admit that there are people that have quote unquote healthy relationships with hard drugs? Yeah. I know people that can recreationally I know people that recreationally smoke meth and shit every once in a while, which is like fucking crazy to me.
Right.
That's to me. But there are people that do that, and they can like smoke meth like once every 2 years, and that's just like a thing that they do or whatever, you know. But and God bless them, whatever. If that's your deal, cool. But like, I'm not gonna roll those dice, you know. I did once already, and it did not pay off for me, you know. So. Granted, that one specifically, I knew, you know, because, you know, anyway, metal, right?
Hey, man. Yeah, we got off topic, but I really appreciate you being like super candid there. If you don't want me to leave this in, I'll cut it out if it's too.
No, I don't care. Yeah, you can no, I don't give a shit. I mean, there should be no stigma, you know.
Yeah.
It's like I don't need. It's not a. I'm not sharing this information because I think there's anything romantic about it or rock and roll about it. I'm sharing it simply because it's like what happened to me this year, and I don't think there should be any shame in it. And I think it's a really horrible, horrible, horrible thing that happens to people. And just because I look like someone that it would happen to stereotypically doesn't mean that I can't be a voice, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest part for me is like, obviously I knew what I was doing when I made the aesthetic choices I've made about myself, because I always kind of took peace in knowing that I lived kind of contrary to my appearance, you know, like I was always sober. I was never especially poorly behaved. I always been polite, articulate. So it was fine because I didn't fulfill people's expectations, you know? And then 30 years old, doing that your whole life, and all of a sudden you're a fucking junkie. Like, you know, like talk about the ultimate fucking existential crisis of like, people see me, I see people seeing me, and I can't strengthen myself with the knowledge that they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was so much of an integral fabric of my self-defense mechanism, is like knowing that their judgments didn't faze me because I knew they were wrong. But when people look at me with head and neck tattoos and this haircut and my outfit, and they think, oh man, that poor soul, they're right, you know? And it's like, that's a bitter fucking medicine, man.
So how long ago was this that all this happened with like your surgery and everything?
January.
Of this year?
January 28th, 2018, yeah.
Okay.
So I was hospitalized for about 3 months, and then I was on drugs for about 3 months more. And then after that, it was the turbulent getting off of them, which culminated in what I was leading up to before with my last ditch effort, my Hail Mary effort. Mm-hmm. To kick them was I stopped taking everything I was on. My steroids, gabapentin, antidepressants, everything. Just like fucking stopped taking everything. Just white knuckled it. And I was like, I knew that was dangerous. I knew that was unhealthy, but I was ready to off myself anyway. So I'm like, this is either going to kill me or fix me, or it'll do neither and I'll have to kill myself, but something's going to happen, you know? So I just stopped taking everything and I white knuckled it for about 9 days. I shit you not. I'm not saying this for effect. I have people in my life that will vouch for it. I did not sleep for 7 days and 6 nights straight. Not a nap, did not enter REM sleep, didn't nod off. I didn't sleep for a week fucking straight. And I was losing my mind. I was actually losing my mind.
Yeah, the psychological ramifications of that are just expounded upon the, drugs leaving your system.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God, dude. I mean, I wasn't me anymore. And I think people don't really appreciate how real that is in people that are that fully in the clutches of a substance like that. Is like, you're not dealing with that person anymore. You're dealing with an imposter. You're dealing with someone who hijacked someone you loved's body. Yeah. That's what you're dealing with. And I don't mean to do that in some shitty way of like relinquishing myself of any accountability. Like, I take accountability for, take my due wherever it is, that's fine. But it is really scary how absent you are. And I remember this like moment of like emergence at the end of that week of no sleep, of insanity. My sister's a nurse. She's begging me. She's like, you need to go to the emergency room. She's like, psychosis is going to set in. She's like, the last patient I had that didn't sleep for 72 hours, I caught drinking her own piss from her bedpan. Whoa. So she's like, and I was up for a week. I was seeing shit. I was seeing race cars on the wall and shit. I was losing it. And I was losing my mind. I was screaming. And I was hitting myself. It was a fucking train wreck, man. It was. And then one day I just popped out of bed, and maybe not popped out of bed, but had this weird surge of energy, went to an Alice in Chains concert by myself after not sleeping for a week, and hallucinated on the drive there.
Whoa.
Hallucinated on the way. I was trying to drive to Seattle after the Alice in Chains show and accidentally drove back to Portland. That's a fucked how I should not have been driving. Yeah, it's for the best that I accidentally drove back to Portland, because I was in no position to be driving much farther. So,
man, the really weirdly serendipitous thing is Jamie from I Declare War actually given me your number way back in January of this year.
Huh.
After he was on, and he was like, yeah, man, like, you should definitely talk to Kyle. I think that you guys would like hit it off. He'd be a good guest for your show. And I was like, okay, cool. And then like just personal life stuff for me kept getting in the way, and I never did it until like, recently. And I hit up Jamie. I was like, hey man, it's been like, I know almost a year, but I would love to get Kyle on. And he's like, yeah, just hit him up, man. And me being oblivious, obviously, because I don't know you, had all this stuff happen in between that time. It's like crazy to think about, like, trying to hit you up back at that point in time. It probably would have been just not happening.
Oh no, it wouldn't have happened. Yeah. And I would have felt really shitty about it too. I'm glad you didn't, because that would have been like another thing I felt like I missed out on.
Yeah.
Because of my illness, and that was hard. It's just, that's the joke. It's the running joke. It's the vitriol curse. Like anytime we start catching momentum, that's when we had first, we were finally like a well-oiled live machine for the first time ever, as a band. In the 7 years of being a band, we were finally like a fucking live band that was performing well. And we were only doing that for about 6-8 months until my health took a shit. And then it was like, well, back to the drawing board, And I still haven't fucking since I got sick this year, I have not stood up with my guitar strapped to my body and ran through the set once. You know, like my body is still very much, I'm still very much not well. I mean, if you look at the promo pictures of us from last year and me now, I mean, I'm 40 plus pounds lighter right now than I am in those photos.
Damn. Yeah. I don't know how extensive your surgery was, and like the most surgery I ever had is I had a hernia surgery, and that was like 2 or 3 years ago now. Like I still feel it sometimes. So and it was an abdominal surgery too, so like you know, it's probably nowhere near the extent that you had to go through, and even just my little things still bothering me. I can imagine you're dealing with a lot more issues than I could even imagine.
See.
Yeah, holy shit, dude.
Yeah, I mean, they had my guts out on the table, so.
Fuck.
Yeah, it was, and they had to do it twice because the first surgery failed, so they had to cut me open again, and it was not sick, dude. It was not tight.
Yeah, no, it's I guess to get like pseudo philosophical here, it's something we really do take for granted until we're in that position where our bodies are failing us and we just realize that we are these bags of flesh that are so just fragile.
Oh yeah, man. And that's not pseudo philosophical, it's just philosophical. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't need to be self-deprecating. Yeah, man, absolutely. I mean, that's the most harrowing thing about being confronted with your mortality is like really being, it's not really your mortality, it's like more concisely your fragility. Mm-hmm. Of just like how much you take for granted your basic physical faculties, right?
Yeah.
Like, my aunt who raised me after my mother's passing, she passed from ALS. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that disease.
Yeah, it's what Jason Becker has, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and that's my worst nightmare. After watching her, after watching her lose herself to that, the idea of your body becoming a prison for your unaffected mind, I cannot imagine a greater horror. And that I got a taste of that with the surgery and being debilitated and immobile for almost a year. Not recognizing myself, both physically, mentally, emotionally. You go through the fucking meat grinder in every emotionally, spiritually, physically. You get minced up, chewed up, spun around, and they say figure it out, ride it out, man. And you just hold on to anything you can find and hope that one day you wake up and it's shit's just stopped spinning.
Well, I know you mentioned kind of like, I guess it not really a cliche, but you mentioned, you know, that drugs kind of go hand in hand with making art. And do you think that maybe like suffering is a part of that too? And, you know, do you think it's also maybe a cliche to use that for the music you write too? Or is that also a good inspiration to have?
Ooh, that's a great question. And I think it's an important one because that is a cliche, right? This idea that, oh, this anguish, this horrible tragedy that happened in your life, at least it will result in some good output in your art. And it's like, I have a real suspicion that anyone that says that, before I say this, I want to qualify it with, I don't think that's necessarily untrue. Mm-hmm. So I'm not trying to discredit that idea. But I do question that the people who assume that if they've ever really experienced a truly debilitating tragedy, because there is nothing inspiring or romantic about a devastating tragedy. There's nothing about being leveled that makes you want to get up and fucking make something. So it's a luxury. I think this fantasy is a luxury of people that have like superficial hardships, like not real ones, like ones that like the fucking
Starbucks got my drink wrong.
Right, sure. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think these hardships, to answer your question sort of in order, right? Being the first question being, do I think hardship is sort of integral, like a prerequisite? I don't think it's necessary to make music. I think it's necessary to make the kind of music that I'm endeavoring to make, which is to communicate suffering. I mean, it's like good art. Like a lot of people would argue this claim, and I think it's fair, but I think good art is honest art.
I agree.
I think that if you don't have a position, if you're not in a position of authority to write on a subject with honesty, then you shouldn't be coming from that place, and that's when you get bands that are dishonest or false or, what we endearingly colloquially refer to as posers, right?
Yeah.
Like people that misrepresent themselves for social gain, which is what is a poser if not that?
Yeah.
So shit, fuck, what were we talking about?
Well, I mean, do you think it would be a cliche to also use what you've been through to put it in your music?
No, it's not a cliche. I mean, I think here's what I will say about like my hardships. I don't feel like I've ever felt directly inspired by anything that I've experienced in the moment. But I think that the worldview that these events have aided in shaping has resulted in like the voice from which like I write music from. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying that they're not. Of course they are one and the same, but I think this idea, I think there's just like the fallacy, like the thought, like the Hollywood trailer version of like this story of the artist, the sad suffering artist is, boy breaks up with girl breaks up with boy, whatever, dad dies, dog dies, someone moves away, whatever, you know what I mean? And then they're heartbroken and devastated, and they run home and they throw their fucking book open and they pull out their pen. They're crying onto the pages as they fucking write down there. Like, I don't think that happens.
No, it doesn't.
I just don't think it. And maybe fuck me, maybe it does, but like it doesn't happen to me.
Yeah, same.
Like I was that artist, you know what I mean? Like when I'm sad, I don't do fucking, like I don't do anything. It's like, it's in my moments of. It's in my moments. It's the lighter moments that I actually write better music, because I can kind of interpret. I don't know, man. That's hard. That's a can of worms to open. That's a whole other conversation of like the creative process. Like you go down that rabbit hole for a long time. But
I mean, I agree with what you're saying, that I resonate more with stuff that is honest, because I know it is, and it feels right to me to be like, okay, I know this person's really talking about things that they have went through or XYZ, and it's like I can appreciate that more.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be even necessarily like honest in a superficial sense, in the sense of like, what are they talking about lyrically or whatever. Just honest in the sense of
it's a myriad of things, I think.
I think here's why honesty is so important, specifically in metal, because I think, and I can argue a case that sincerity is of paramount importance in metal over almost any other genre, because metal is inherently, to most people, silly on its face.
Yeah.
Right? Even like the spooky metal.
Oh, absolutely.
It's silly to people. Like, it's only cool and badass to us. Not to him.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
You're not scaring anybody, buddy. Fuck, god damn it. My fucking weed brain. What the fuck was I just saying?
Just about like the sincerity of like music.
Yes, thank you. How it's important. Thank you. Fucking Jesus. God, I would fucking put my shoes on in the fucking morning.
It's cool, man.
So,
I won't keep you too much longer after this.
Okay. Well, I think when you're dealing with subject matter that can so easily be just fucking silly,
yeah.
It has to come from a place of sincerity. If it's contrived, it's just fucking goofy. You know, it's not. The only way you can do something that is so out of this world to an average person is to fully fucking believe it, you know? And that's how you get people. I mean, this isn't just in metal. I mean, look at artists like Lady Gaga and shit. You know what I mean? Like, people treat her like she can do that because she does that because she decided she could. You know?
Yeah.
And she interpreted herself honestly. And in metal, you get a lot of people making music dishonestly. You get a lot of contrived copycat bands. You know, like, I would cite most of the whole old school death metal revival movement as being bands that are just like, they don't really fucking get it. You know, like, they know what pedals to use, they know what amps to use, they know what shirts to wear, they know what guitars to buy, they know what fucking riffs to play, but they don't get it. They don't get the spirit of what made those albums good and why they couldn't even replicate it if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And why it's not a valuable thing to replicate it, you know? And that's a whole other conversation that I won't dive into, but I don't find very much value in, you know, vintage metal. Even like modern vintage, like, I don't see the sense in trying to fish from a well that we know is dry, you know, and that, like, why attempt to write riffs that a dude wrote better than you ever will 30 years ago? Like, why don't you take whatever affection you have for his music? How did his riffs make you feel?
Mm-hmm.
What is it about? What is the essence of that band's music that moved you? Because, you know, like, let's say, you know, pick a band, let's say Morbid Angel, right? A band so many of us love.
Oh, yeah.
But part of their success is there's so many different ways to like Morbid Angel. There's so many different reasons to like Morbid Angel, you know?
Yeah. I mean, their discography is pretty eclectic, I will say that.
Yeah.
But also kind of not in the same respect.
Yeah. You know, that band, I mean, God, that's such a testament to a band that has written music honestly, with conviction, artistic conviction and integrity, barring, you know, the albums that shall not be named.
Yep. The one that we do not talk about.
yeah, barring that one. I mean, I'm even an apologist for the new album. I think the new album's fine. I think it's...
Yeah, I didn't mind it at all either. I was like, cool, this is exactly what I wanted, what the last album should have been, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if their legacy wasn't interrupted by Illud Divinum, that the new album wouldn't have been so ill-received. I just think that they fucked them, that they would have had to come back so fucking strong to make up for the blunder that was that album.
Yeah.
That I didn't think they ever would have done it, but I'm such a fanboy of the whole Trey and Steve Tucker combo that, you know, I would have gobbled up anything they put out. it wasn't like the next Formulas or anything. But it was fine. It was like good. It was competent. It was it was a fucking, at least it was a death metal album, not like an industrial rap rock album.
Yeah.
You know, so at least there's that.
I'm glad you dropped Formulas there. That's definitely my favorite album. But,
yeah, I think that's one of the best.
Ahead
maybe
of its time.
second to Conquering the Throne. It might be the best death metal album ever written, in my opinion. Yeah,
that riff in Nothing Is Not, Jesus. Every time I hear that song, I'm like, this came out in 97? Who the fuck is writing this kind of stuff in 97? Oh, Only Morbid Angel.
Yeah, psychopaths like Trey. Yeah, that guy is just a dude that's been so unapologetically and honestly himself his entire career that it's like, I don't give a shit what you do in your career. Like, I don't have to agree with what you do, but if you're doing it with honesty, especially when dudes like have persona or say things in interviews or whatever that like they know that whatever they're going to say is going to be an unpopular opinion with their fans or whatever, and they just understand that there's more value in being sincere. And that attracts, and not just for like this loose sense of like ethics or integrity of like, oh, just be an honest person because it's like a good virtuous thing to be an honest person, but there's like a really pragmatic, like mechanical benefit to being an honest person. And I think if you live your life in an honest way and you create art in an honest way, you're going to attract other honest people, or you're going to attract people that resonate with your truth more, your identity or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's, I think the more honest you are, the healthier your social life's going to be, because it's just like what's the word I'm looking for? Like an inevitable symptom of living honestly is like attracting like-minded people, and if you're putting up a facade, you're insulating yourself from like-minded people because they'll never find you because you're not outputting your authentic self.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to do. I think a lot of people tend to kind of build up those shells sometimes. Not everybody, but I guess it depends on if you're using it for nefarious means.
Yeah, I think a lot of people also just don't know who they are.
Yeah. And
that's okay too, Like that's its own thing. I don't think they're like that should be like discriminated against. It's like I just think that I don't think it's unfair to say that like there are people that just shouldn't make art. I don't mean that in like a totalitarian, like there's someone who should dictate who gets to it, who doesn't sense. I think everyone should have the right to make art if they so wish. But I believe that there are people that are not equipped to make good quality art. 100% yeah.
Yeah.
And it's people that don't have a strong sense of self, and they're not emotionally articulate, and they can't fucking be honest with themselves.
I think that's like the core of trying to be vulnerable, when you're making art. It's not easy to do, but if it comes from that place, it's a lot more impactful, I think.
Yeah. And there's this like really silly, going back to fucking popular fallacies of like, you think about like this artist, right? And there's already like this ego, this perception of ego that's already conflated with like the word artist. Like if you think of an artist, you already think of someone with their head up their ass with self-importance. God damn it. Fuck. My fucking brain. I'll get it back. Fucking artists.
It's just having like that impact from
artist
like
impact.
Being authentic and.
Oh yes, okay. That's what I was saying. So I think what's interesting is the fallacy of like the ego, the arrogant, fucking ego-driven artist, and I think it's just like so false. Like it's like I think anybody I've talked to that I think has really tried to explore like what it means to make art in a real way. Understands like it's 101 that the more you can remove your own ego from whatever it is that you're making, mm-hmm. the more the identity of that thing begins to manifest and come to fruition. And the more that and in this case, you know, not to be abstract, so like to reference, to put it into a concrete context, let's say Vitriol, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So with Vitriol, and this goes back to, you know, coming full circle to the beginning of the conversation and what it's like being a musician, trying to find your sound, and from the very beginning, learning riffs of your favorite bands. It's like, it starts out being all you, right? It's all your ego. It's all your interests. Your music is just a montage, a collage of a mixtape of your favorite riffs, right? It's all ego.
Yeah.
There's no band. It's just you. It's the fucking Kyle Rasmussen show or whatever, whoever's writing the music. And the more, when people say that with the band found their sound, this is when the band found their sound. I think it's just a really inaccurate way of, but like, I guess the band found its sound, and the music found it. It's just, it's like, there's this moment where like you kind of hand the keys over to like the fully realized project. And you're like, okay, now this thing is external from me, right? So when I'm working on music for Vitriol and I'm trying to decide if it's good enough or it's appropriate, it's not just whether or not I like it. Like, I like a lot of fucking shit, man.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of shit that's not hyper violent technical death metal, you know, like, so it's not like it's there's something really ego driven about just like bands that just kind of like strong arm their personal interest in it. Like, we give a fucking shit. Like, I don't care about your interest, dude. I just care about like good music, make good music. Mm-hmm. So I think that in order to be a committed, sincere, unapologetic artist, you have to be committed to the idea of actively severing your ego from your work. I mean, that's the whole fucking idea. That's the goal. That's the ultimate goal, is to remove yourself entirely from it. And that's when it develops its own identity. And that's when bands become more than a group of dudes, right? You know, yeah. Full circle. You know, what I was talking about at the beginning was like, it's not a group of dudes anymore. Now it's a fucking entity, you know? Like, look at bands like Behemoth.
Yeah.
You know, these are bands, this is no longer a collection of men. This is its own thing. It's its own living, breathing thing that exists outside of Adam Darsky and whatever, you know? So that's something I'd like to do. And I think it's impossible to do that with too much ego in the creative process. I mean, I can't speak for any other, you know, how artists behave themselves outside of that, but
it's just what works for you and what you want to accomplish with the band, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you just have to know what process works for you, you know. And if you're lucky enough to have someone that, like, you know, you're one of those dudes that like has a homie that started playing guitar with you, and you guys see eye to eye, and you like the same shit, and you guys that's fucking awesome, you know. Like, my old band was cool. It was like a 50-50 band, you know. It was me and another guitar player, and we each wrote half the album and collaborated on stuff. And Vitriol was my first project where I wrote everything, you know, and that was scary. That was an intimidating undertaking. And I overshot it a bit, but, you know, I had a lot to prove there, I guess. Yeah, I don't fucking know. I don't know what I'm saying.
Well, we'll wind down here. Let's just What do you got planned for the band in the future, I guess? Like, you know, I know you have like a long road back. You just put out the playthrough video, but you said it's an old song. What do you want to accomplish this coming year, you know?
Well, right before we made this call, I was actually tracking Adam Space on the 8th of 10 songs for the full length. So that has been locked and loaded for some time. Like this material, a lot of this material are a few years old. We've just been wanting to, like, the EP was just supposed to be a demo. But here's the sad reality: is I keep making moves thinking that it's gonna secure us some sort of a record deal, so when we put out the full length, it doesn't fall on deaf ears.
Yeah.
Because this is something that I've poured my fucking entire adult life into, and I'd be devastated for it to just fall flat on the internet on Bandcamp somewhere and just like fade into obscurity, you know. So I've been just keep making attempts to like secure some better. It just, nothing comes up. No one fucking wants anything to do with it. So I don't know. Every time we do something, every time we release something or make an announcement, there's always some lead. There's always some guy that's like, it's always like a friend of someone of authority, you know, like it's always a close friend of someone who can make things happen. And it's like them trying to convince their friend that we're good or whatever.
Yeah.
And then nothing ever comes of it. So that's what's happening right now. So there's a new round of people being spoken to at labels. So we'll see. I'm basically, to answer your question, I'm ready to release this full length almost whenever, within reason. And I'm ready to willing and ready to do whatever someone's willing to do with us. I mean, we want to hit the road. We want to be a full-time band. We're not going to be some weekend warrior festival band. Like, we want to do it for real. We want to tour, you know. It's just a matter of someone wanting us, you know. And it's cool, man. I mean, it's like I don't doubt what we're doing. I think it's sick. I think it's just, we're not pandering, you know. We refuse to pander. I'm not going to pretend to be a part of a trend to get some in at a label, you know. Like, we're not an old school death metal revival band. We're not a primitive black metal band. We're not a war metal band. We're not a technical death metal band, you know. Like, we're whatever it is we are. And I think it's sick, and other people seem to think so. And I think given some time, you know, hopefully something will come of it.
I think the band name you guys chose sums up the sound of your music pretty well. That's a pretty rare thing to get hand in hand like that. So
yeah, and to think that, I mean, there were like a couple other bands called that. The only band named Vitriol that predated us when we did the research was some European progressive like metal rock band, like something that was like so far removed, you know, culturally, that like it didn't matter. But I remember thinking, just like being shocked like that, like, how is that not a fucking band name?
Right.
All right. Like, how has that not been taken? Like, because it's like, it's such a rare, beautiful thing to get a one-word band name, because like it almost makes you sound classic, you know, because it's like I've had that conversation with other metalheads. I'm like, it's funny because like you can almost date a band by how obvious their name is, right? So the more obvious the name, the older the band, because it's just a process of elimination. You know, if you want to start a death metal band, oh, what do you call it? I don't know, death. Oh, Taken. I don't know, suffocation. No, Taken. You know, so you go down until you're like unfathomable, congruous, fucking immolated dusk or whatever, you know, because you're chasing a game of receding fucking options, you know, and then it's just the same words in a different language. So the fact that we got a really good death metal, one word death metal band name in English is like fucking wild to me. So it worked out. I mean, it was funny because I didn't even consider it for a band name. I considered it for like a theme, like our band's like logo or whatever, was because there's a whole history behind Vitriol, like the alchemical alchemical lore of vitriol, not just like the dictionary definition of like hostility and contempt, but of sulfuric acid. There's a lot of cool imagery and history behind the idea of that and the role it played in alchemy. And it just hit me over the head. I was like struggling with band names, and I'm like, didn't even think, like, I had this whole idea surrounding Vitriol for like a fucking merch or whatever, and I didn't even think to make it a band name. And then it was just one of those stupid aha moments. I'm like, oh yeah. And then I immediately ran to Metal Archives, typed in Vitriol, crossed my fingers, and at the time, nothing. So yeah, that's the band name. That's how that happened.
It's perfect. I can't think of a better way to end it with a nice little bow.
Well, I'm saying thanks for tolerating my rants and my fucking short-term memory loss and all that.
No, man, this was good. I appreciate you taking the time and being honest and candid, and damn, yeah, it was unexpected. So I'm glad Jamie fucking gave me your number almost a year ago.
And, yeah, man. Thanks for reaching out. It means a lot. Hopefully you can edit that to make me sound a little more eloquent.
You did a good enough job yourself, man. You sounded perfectly eloquent.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Well, thank you for the opportunity and entertaining my my little segues and shit. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. So Vitriol, Facebook, if you want people to Bandcamp, I guess, all that stuff.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah, Facebook, Bandcamp, Instagram.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
Show, just to make sure you're listening.
Yeah, I guess if there was be anything to promote, it would be the release of Pain Will Define Their Death. Our EP that we self-released last year was released through Everlasting Spew Records in Italy. This just November 30th was the official release, so not even a week ago. Came out on 7-inch and CD. The CD includes the bonus track, The Parting of a Neck, that we have the new playthrough video on our YouTube channel of. So there's my little plug for Vitriol there. And,
perfect.
Sweet. Hopefully that's enough.
Be excellent to each other. And